What's up, my War Eagles? So today we're going to be talking about what witchcraft is biblically. Now this is going to be a two-part series. The first part is going to be covering over the principles, mystical, non-mystical, rebellion, what is witchcraft, okay? And then the next video is going to be showing you that across multiple cultures, religions, belief systems, and how it is all witchcraft, okay? This comes back to the video from yesterday, guys. The two kingdoms, right? So if you haven't watched that, go watch the two kingdoms, because it's always been Israel versus, the pagan nations, witchcraft, divination, sorcery, charming, all that stuff. And so, quickly stated, what is witchcraft? What is witchcraft? Witchcraft is anything, anytime that you want to use or you provoke or use the spirit realm for your own gain, for your own desires. So witchcraft is anytime you're using the spirit realm for your own desires. There are some mystical elements of witchcraft and there are some non-mystical elements of witchcraft. So quickly, let's look at the mystical elements or principles of witchcraft that can be seen across many different cultures. The first one is the 5 elementals. Now this is the foundation, the building block, guys. The 5 elementals. You got water, earth, fire, air, and spirit. Okay? That is the 5 elementals. Whenever you're involved in witchcraft, you're channeling at least one of these elementals, and that is called circling. And so what you would do is you would invite the elements or the 4 winds to be with you in that environment, depending on the culture, depending on the practice, you invite. But you don't always need to invite every single element or representative of that. You only need to technically channel one element, like an ESP, for example, extrasensory perception. You're channeling primarily the spirit element unless you're into elemental bending. But for like telekinesis and stuff, you're in a contract agreement. You're channeling one elemental spirit representing the spirit element. But I digress. The next principle is circling. And so you circle a deity or the elementals. And like I said, you're just inviting them to be in the room with you. It's almost like inviting Holy Spirit to be in the room with you. It's the same idea. And so you're just giving them the legal right to be in your presence. Sacrifice. Sacrifice is the third point that we can see across many, many different systems that do not originate from Yahweh. Okay? That do not originate from the God of Israel. And, in white magic and Wicca, we see this in the law, observing the law, the high days, all these rituals that you got to do to be atoned right in front of these deities. In dark magic, it's usually the blood. There's blood sacrifices. The blood bypasses a lot of the law and a lot of the rituals. But there are still some there, and you need to do those rituals to accordance to what those demonic spirits want. And then, you even get into stuff like Buddhism. What, yes, is a form of witchcraft because you're dealing with the elementals, and the sacrifice is yourself. You are to deny yourself to become one with the universe. And so we see all across the system that there is sacrifice. Some other elements, again, not every element has to be present for it to be witchcraft. But one additional common theme that can give a hint that it could be originating from a false spirit is secrecy. The occult can literally be translated as in secret. And so we see, like with the Freemasons, some of the darker groups of Wicca and Satanism, very, very secret groups, very secret underground organizations. And so secrecy is something that is very, very prevalent in the occult. You don't know information until you progress to the next rank. And so there's always stuff that's held back. Now, non-mystical elements of witchcraft. In the Bible, witchcraft can be defined as a work of the flesh. It's not all spiritual. It has to be crucified. You can't just cast out spirits of divination. There is a temptation for the flesh to use the spirit realm for their own will. And set aside from that, witchcraft is also trying to get another spirit to do your will. And so we see this in a non-spiritual manner, in control, manipulation, intimidation, anger. And so we see this a lot in the churches. We see this a lot in marriage, where people can't be challenged. They're raised up and they intimidate. And that is a form of witchcraft. Rebellion is also a form of witchcraft. We see that in 1 Samuel 15:23, that rebellion is as the act of witchcraft. Right? And so you're doing your own will. You're moving towards your agenda instead of the Lord's. And so that, in its essence, is witchcraft. Now, Deuteronomy 18:9-14 says this: when you come into the land that the Lord your God is giving you, ye shall not learn to follow the abominational practices of those nations. There shall not be found among you one who burns his son or daughter as an offering. Anyone who practices divination, or tells fortunes, or interprets omens, or a sorcerer, or a charmer, or a medium, or a necromancer, or one who inquires of the dead. And so we see in that statement that there are many different things that the Lord considers witchcraft. So maybe we should look into what some of those words and what some of those things mean. Okay? Divination versus sorcery. Witchcraft versus sorcerer. These are two terms we often hear. Witches, sorcerers. What's the difference? Okay. So in my understanding, and I could be wrong. I could be totally wrong on this. This is my opinion. There's going to be others who disagree. Divination, let's just call that witchcraft. This Bible calls it divination, but let's call that witchcraft. It's an inside power. You're either born with it or you don't have it. It's a connection, a sensitivity to the spirit realm. All right, so this is a lot of people who have prophetic giftings. They can easily fall under the category of divination if raised into the occult. And so divination or witchcraft is when you have a connection to the spiritual realm. It's an inside power. It's more of an emotional tie, and the magic is emotion. Okay, it's more of an emotional link. In sorcery, anyone can do it. It's more like an apprentice. You're relying on outside powers. So you're calling in deities. You're doing rituals. There's blood in both, but sorcery has a tendency to use more blood. But the main thing is that anyone can learn. You're relying on an outside power, even though both use the help of demons. The diviner, the witch, just has a more natural sense to the spirit realm, to say. The next thing they warn about, or the next thing Yahweh warns about, are fortune tellers. People who want to predict the future. And now this is the occult as well. And so this could be your stargazers, your astrologers, your dream interpreters, anyone who's trying to look into the future for spiritual means, spiritual guidance. Those are your fortune tellers. And that's an occult practice as well, because you're relying on divinating spirits. You're relying on demonic spirits to tell you the future that they actually themselves do not know, but are in the works of making that your reality because you have allowed them that legal right. After that, he warns about not interpreting omens. And so this is like looking at things as good or bad luck. Like, oh, there's a raven, something's going to die. It's an evil omen. It's an evil spirit. It's an evil sign. Well, in the Bible, Elisha was fed by ravens. Elisha was fed by ravens. They were a symbol of provision. And so we cannot be putting spiritual symbols onto creation when they are neither good nor bad. The Lord called them good, right? And so we cannot be putting a spiritual significance for the future on an object. That's an occult practice, guys, and everyone in the church, a lot of people in the church do it, and it's time to repent for that and turn back to the word of the Lord. All right, the next category that he warns about are charmers. Now, what are charmers? Well, a charmer is an enchanter. And what they do is they use a spell or they use a ritual, and they place demonic spirits onto an object. And these enchantments can either aid them with spiritual help, or they can bring curses onto their enemies. And so this is something else the Lord has warned about. The last two that he warns about are medium and necromancer. And now, there are differences between the two, but for the simplicity of this video, let's call them the same thing, okay? They're both a link to the dead. They're both inquiring of the dead. They're both dark. Necromancers are seen oftentimes as more darker than mediums. They're both dark. And so I'm not going to label one as darker than the other. Both inquire of familiar spirits. And that's going to be a different video that's coming out soon, shortly, guys. Alrighty. Outside of this, it's hard to separate witchcraft from other categories that is not warned here. And so it's hard to separate witchcraft away from shifters. And so what are shifters? Shifters, they are seen throughout almost every culture. You have, they're basically people who have the ability to transform into animals, whether spiritually, in spiritual form, or physically. The Native Americans called them skinwalkers. The Aztecs had the jaguar warriors. Every culture has a shifter of some form, some shape. India has were-tigers. You obviously know about the werewolves. There's just so much about shifting that it's hard to separate from witchcraft. And I don't know how deep I'm supposed to go into this area, so shifters can be either like divination, where it's a gift, it's an ability that they have that is enhanced for demonic spirits, or it can be like a sorcerer that has conjured up enough rituals, enough power to do it with the aid of false deities, false gods, again, fallen angels, demonic spirits. There are many concepts, many ideologies behind shifting. Again, I don't know how deep I want to get into this, guys. Some believe that it's an illusion from demons, that there is actually no shift. And I would say that's incorrect. Demons are involved, but it's not just an illusion. There is physical shifting, but everything happens in the spirit beforehand. And so there is another theory that it's the soul of the individual, and that the soul comes out of the individual almost like astral projecting, and the person is left in a trance-like state. That is closer to my understanding of shifting, but there is also a physical form of shifting too. And so both forms do exist. I don't know how deep the Lord wants me to talk on this. I'm not here trying to promote darkness, so the reality is all these witchcraft practices do exist. They are not of the Lord. The Lord has warned his people to stay away from these practices, to stay away from divination and sorcery and fortune telling. He is to be our trust. He is to be our guide, our resource. And so he is our hope. And so in part 2, coming out tomorrow, I'm going to be showing some of these principles and how the nations of the world use them. And it will be building upon the foundation of yesterday's video of the 2 kingdoms. Like, subscribe, comment, call me crazy. You guys are allowed to do that. Have a great day, my War Eagles.